Good afternoon. We are continuing our journey through the text of Proverbs 1 through 9, working with the text a little bit and trying to figure out the various uses of parallelism the author has put into place to help us better understand the text. Of course, we can read a lot of what Proverbs says and understand it, but sometimes when we note these nuances, it helps bring the text to life even more. What we have in Proverbs 1 through 9 are a series of lectures that the father gives to his son. The wise man is passing on to his child, and so we can learn something from these lectures. We are working with this text in our sermons on Sunday morning here at the Church of Christ in Moody, and we are obviously not dealing with the text like we're doing it in these videos. This is something a little extra just to help us wrestle with the text, get it into our minds a little bit more. We start with the text, and before we dig in, we want to note that what we have here are 22 verses or 22 stanzas, and that number happens to match the number of letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And maybe that is suggesting completeness. Now, it's not an acrostic like we might normally think about Psalm 119 or Proverbs 31, but it does match that. Maybe it's an alphabet poem, could think of it. But there are some interesting things that are going on. The chapter is divided in half. In Proverbs 2, 1 through 11, we see wisdom's development and how one goes about getting wisdom. And each section begins with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. That's an aleph. And what we see is that it breaks down very nicely, and the second half breaks down exactly the same. In verses 1 through 4, we have the parent's instruction, which consists of 8 lines. In verses 5 through 8, we have the goal of fearing and knowing God, which is 8 lines. And then in verses 9 through 11, we have the idea of knowing righteousness, which is 6 lines. And again, the second half of the chapter is going to break down that same way. 8 lines, 8 lines, 6 lines. And so that's very helpful. We can see some structure. It's not just a random lecture from the father or the wise man. It is something that is organized, it is structured, and that does give it the idea of completeness and fullness. Let's look at the words a little bit. My son, if you hear my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding, yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come understanding and knowledge. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity. Every good path for wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you. Understanding will guard you. Now, we've been going through our text every week and just noting the parallels. We'll just do that very quickly today. I think you're probably getting the hang of this, and you can see how one line matches up with the second line. And sometimes this helps us better understand the first line. It clarifies something. It maybe builds on the idea. And what we have really throughout this entire chapter is just synonymous parallelism. So we're basically just going to be dealing with blue lines and boxes here. We have a couple of green lines we'll use. Sometimes I use the green when I'm not exactly sure what is happening with the text, but we'll talk through those things. We see making your ear attentive and inclining your heart. It's not just about hearing. It is allowing it to get into you. We see this connection between wisdom and understanding. If you call out for insight, raise your voice for understanding. If you'll remember, that's exactly what Lady Wisdom was doing in chapter 1. She was calling out, well, we had best call back for insight and for understanding. We know what happens if we don't. If we seek it like silver, search for it as hidden treasures. I can't help but think of the parable of the pearl of great price, or the parable of the lost treasure, and how everything went into finding that. So our search for wisdom should be. Because then, this has been one long if statement. Now we get to the then statement. In fact, chapter 22 could really just be one long sentence, as if the Father takes a deep breath and then lets it rip. And the whole chapter is really just one long sentence building on this if-then statement. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. We see this connection between the fear of the Lord and the knowledge of God. I've said before, this idea of the fear of the Lord, it is much bigger than the sum of its parts. It's more than just being afraid of God. A lot more goes into it than that. For the Lord gives wisdom, his mouth, he stores up. And so we actually have a few different parts or parallels going on in this passage. We see the connection between wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and sound wisdom for the upright. And then we see the benefits of this, that he is a shield to those who walk in integrity. That's the aspect of this passage that we're going to pick up for our sermon on Sunday, this idea of God being our shield and wisdom becoming our shield. He is guarding our paths. He is watching over us. And then we have the repeated theme of the path, the road that we are traveling down as we live our life. So we have we have paths, we have the way, those of integrity, those of justice, and those people are called saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity, every good path. Don't exactly know how to fit that into our parallel structure. Maybe he's just setting up the next two parallel lines. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. We have this connection between heart and soul, I think, that we pretty much have understood is there. Discretion will watch over you, and understanding will guard you. And then this is the development of wisdom, how we're putting it all together. This comes from a reliance on God, and we develop wisdom as a gift from God. And then we turn to the next section, and we see the deliverance that wisdom provides us. Proverbs 2:12 through 22 talks about wisdom's deliverance. And I said in the first half that every section began with an aleph. In this section, or in this half, every section begins with a lamed. That basically the equivalent of an L, it seems. And so in verses 12 through 15, we have deliverance from wicked men, and that makes up 8 lines. Verses 16 through 19, we have deliverance from wicked women. That makes up 8 lines. And then in verses 9 through 11, we have deliverance from death, which makes up 6 lines. And so it's a very nice, organized section. The chapter is broken in half, and we have a matching pattern here. He says that he is delivering, or that the wisdom is going to deliver us from evil, from men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So, in like manner is what he's saying, you will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God, for her house sinks down to death and her paths to the departed. None who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. So, in like manner, you will walk in the way of the good and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright will inhabit the land, and those with integrity will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the treacherous will be rooted out of it. So we'll jump through the text like we have in other places. We see right off the gate, we have more synonymous parallelism. That's what we're dealing with in this chapter. We see the way of evil is right there with those who have this perverted speech, that which is not right. We have that these people have forsaken righteousness and the paths of righteousness. They walk in the ways of darkness and participate in uprightness. We see these parallels here. They rejoice in doing evil. They delight in the perverseness of evil. He continues, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. Have a little ABBA pattern there. That's the first time we've seen it in the text today. And just in the same way that wisdom will deliver us from wicked men, so also wisdom will deliver us from wicked women, that forbidden woman that we have no right to. You will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. We have here the second line really helping us better understand the first line, and we're actually going to see the forbidden woman later, what she says to entice us to come to her. And so we see these parallel ideas. This woman forsakes the companion of her youth. She forgets the covenant of her God. And so there's some discussion here. Is the companion of her youth her husband, or is the companion of her youth God? Either way, she's forsaking both of them if she's trying to bring you in to get you to lie with her. Her house sinks down to death, her paths to the departed. The idea is if you go in there, you're not coming back. None who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. There's no coming back from this once you give up yourself to her. So you will walk in the way of the good. You will keep to the paths of the righteous. We could have broken this one down a little bit more and seen three parallel items here. But again, we have this emphasis of the way, the path that we are on. For the upright will inhabit the land, and those with integrity will remain in it. And what's interesting is these last two stanzas, let's say, are both using synonymous parallelism, but each stanza is actually the opposite of one another. So when you look at the whole stanza, that we could have maybe colored them red because of how they work with each other. But the wicked, as compared to the upright, will be cut off from the land, and the treacherous will be rooted out of it. If you go through the Old Testament, especially the law of Moses, and look at this idea of being cut off from the people or from the land, what you're talking about is death. And so what we see in wisdom's deliverance, we see deliverance from the wicked man, we see deliverance from the wicked woman, and we see deliverance from death. What we're seeing is how wisdom works. And we've started talking about some of the issues of wisdom, justice and integrity and those kinds of things. If our life is defined by those aspects that we see and learn from God, then we are going to be safer. It will be a shield for us, and God will protect us. If we want it and seek it, God is gracious enough to give it. We have to ask for it. James 1 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask from God, who gives to all, but let him ask in faith. Are we looking for wisdom? Are we searching for wisdom? Are we appreciative of the benefits that wisdom provides and the deliverance that wisdom provides from evil men, evil women, and death? We'll see you next time.